TOTUM AMORIS est, encyclical apostolic letter of Pope Francis on Saint François de Sales following. True devotion. A second great crucial decision of Francis was to approach the issue of devotion. Here too, as in our own day, the dawning of a new age had raised a number of questions. Two aspects of the issue need to be understood and reappropriated today. The first regards the very idea of devotion, the second, its universal and popular character. At the beginning of the introduction of the devout life, Francis clarifies the meaning of devotion. It is necessary, first of all, to know in what the virtue of devotion consists. There is only one true devotion, and many false and vain ones. Unless you can distinguish true devotion, you can fall into error and waste your time running after some useless and superstitious devotion. Francis's description of false devotion is delightful and ever timely. Everyone can relate to it, since he salts it with good humor. Someone attached to fasting will consider himself devout because he doesn't eat, even though his heart is filled with bitterness. And while, out of love for sobriety, he will not let a drop of wine or even water touch his tongue, he will not scruple to drench it in the blood of his neighbor through gossip and slander. Another will consider himself devout because all day long he mumbles a string of prayers, yet remains heedless of the evil, arrogant, and hurtful words that his tongue hurls at his servants and neighbors. Yet another will readily open his purse to give alms to the poor, but cannot wring an ounce of mercy from his heart in order to forgive his enemies. Another still will pardon his enemies, yet never even think of paying his debts. It will take a lawsuit to make him to do so. All these, of course, are perennial vices and struggles, and they lead the saint to conclude that all these fine people, commonly considered devout, most surely are not. The origin of true devotion is to be found elsewhere. Its deepest roots are in God's life dwelling within our hearts. True and lively devotion presupposes the love of God. Indeed, it is none other than a genuine and not generic love of God. In Francis's lively language, devotion is a sort of spiritual alertness and energy whereby charity acts within us, or we act by means of it with promptness and affection. For this reason, devotion does not exist alongside charity, but is one of its manifestations, while at the same time leading back to it. Devotion is like a flame with regard to fire. It increases the intensity of charity without altering its quality. In the end, charity and devotion can be said to differ from one another as fire from a flame. Charity is a spiritual fire that, when fanned into flame, is called devotion. Devotion thus adds nothing to the fire of charity but the flame that makes charity prompt, active, and diligent, not only in the observance of God's commandments, but also in the exercise of his divine counsels and inspirations. Understood in this way, devotion is far from something abstract. Rather, it becomes a style of life, a way of living, immersed in our concrete daily existence. It embraces and discovers meaning in the little things: food and dress, work and relaxation, love and parenthood, conscientiousness in the fulfillment of our duties. In a word, it sheds light on the vocation of each individual. Here we begin to see the popular dimension of devotion, which is present from the very first words of the introduction to the devout life. Almost all those who have treated of devotion have sought to instruct persons living apart from the world, or at least they have taught a kind of devotion that leads to such isolation. I intend to offer my teachings to those who live in cities, in families, at court, and who, by virtue of their state in life, are obliged to live in the midst of others. Those who think that devotion is restricted to some quiet and secluded setting are greatly mistaken. Devotion is meant for everyone, in every situation, and each of us can practice it in accordance with our own vocation. As St. Paul VI wrote on the 4th centenary of the birth of Francis de Sales, holiness is not the prerogative of any one group, but an urgent summons addressed to every Christian: friend, come up higher. Luke 14:10. All of us are called to ascend the mountain of God, albeit not each by the same path. Devotion must be practiced differently by the gentleman, the craftsman, the chamberlain, the prince, the widow, the young woman, the wife. Moreover, the practice of devotion must be adapted to the abilities, affairs, and duties of each. To live in the midst of the secular city while nurturing the interior life, to combine the desire for perfection with every state of life, and to discover an interior peace that does not separate us from the world, but teaches us how to live in it and to appreciate it, but also to maintain a proper detachment from it. That was the aim of Francis de Sales, and it remains a valuable lesson for men and women in our times. This was also the teaching of the Second Vatican Council on the universal vocation to holiness. Quote, strengthened by so many and such great means of salvation, all the faithful, whatever their conditions or state, are called by God, each in his or her own way, to that perfect holiness by which the Father himself is perfect. Each in his or her own way, we should not grow discouraged before examples of holiness that appear unattainable. Mother Church proposes them to us not to copy them, but so that we can be spurred on in our pursuit of the specific path that the Lord has chosen for each of us. The most important thing is that each believer discern his or her own path, that they bring out the very best of themselves, the most personal gifts that God has placed in their hearts. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7.